Hello and welcome to the Strike a Balance podcast for Working Homeschool Moms. This is Charlotte Jones. I'm a homeschool coach and homeschooling mom of twin boys. I know it can feel really overwhelming to keep all the balls in the air all the time. So each week I chat about tips and strategies for being a happy and thriving working homeschool mom that you can implement in your life too. I also speak to awesome and inspiring women who manage to juggle homeschooling and work successfully and find out what their secrets are. Be sure to check out my time audit and mindset challenge in the show notes and sign up to my newsletter for lots of cool freebies. And if you ever need to chat, please book in a session with me. I'm so excited for you to be here and I hope you'll get so much value out of this episode. So let's get started. I'm so excited that one of my favorite podcasting tools, Zencastr, is sponsoring this episode. Podcasting is a fantastic way to get yourself and your story out there, but it can be super overwhelming to get started. Zencastr's all-in-one web-based solution makes podcasting super simple, and if you know me, you know I'm obsessed with simplicity. Zencastr provides crystal clear sound and gorgeous HD video while being really easy to use. I love the fact that my guests just have to click a link and we're ready to record. Zencastr is all about making your podcasting experience easy, and with everything from local recording to automatic post-production tools, you don't have to leave your browser to get the episode done. And with their cloud backup, you'll never lose an episode. If you want to share your story, then I highly recommend using Zencastr because it's awesome. If you go to zen.ai/strikeabalance and enter promo code strikeabalance, you'll get 30% off your first 3 months. That's zen.ai/strikeabalance. I'm so excited to listen to your new podcast and to hear your story. Leeway at the beginning, and then we can get started. All right. Today I'm going to be talking to Sarah Miller, who is a homeschool mom, blogger, and the creator of the Reading Better Together curriculum. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hi, Charlotte. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, so before we get into the interview proper, I want to ask you a question that I think is super fun because it really makes you think. So if you were to publish your autobiography today, what would be the title and why?
That is a great question, and it does make me think. I think that there are a lot of things that I do in my life, but I think the thing that I'm really most proud of is how I am a mom to my kids. And so that would be what I would want to focus on in my autobiography would just be the relationship that I have with them and the ways that I am their mom.
Okay, I love that. That's really, really lovely. And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure, definitely. So I am a mom of two. I have younger kids. So if there's anybody out there listening that has younger kids as well, I am right there in the trenches with you. And I have been homeschooling them since preschool or really since birth. I'm also blogging over at Homeschooling for Him, where I provide resources to help parents teach their kids how to read with confidence and to get started with homeschooling. And then in my free time, I love to read and to travel with my family.
All right. And how long have you been? Okay, so you said obviously you've been homeschooling since your kids were very little, but how long have you been a working homeschool mom and what made you decide to choose that kind of path?
Yeah, definitely. So I have been working for almost 2 years. I started my business in August of 2020, and it really actually wasn't an intentional choice on my part. There were a lot of families that I knew that were really struggling with school choices at the time. They were not feeling satisfied with the options that were being presented by the public school system in response to the pandemic. And so they were really exploring what kinds of other options were out there and how they could do something different for their kids. And at that time, we had been homeschooling for a couple of years, and I really wanted to be able to help those families to be successful with that transition to homeschooling. So the business just kind of grew as I found new ways to be able to provide support and resources to those parents.
Yeah, I think all homeschoolers who had already been homeschooling for a while kind of felt that, need to help because it's so scary to start homeschooling. And if it's kind of forced on you, it must be terrifying for parents, I
Th- th-
think.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, there were lots of families that were really struggling, and it was just wonderful to be able to come alongside and support them in that transition.
Absolutely, yeah. And so what does your schedule look like roughly kind of on a day-to-day basis and how you kind of homeschool throughout the year?
Sure, that's a great question. So, as far as our daily schedule, I try to keep things as consistent for my kids as possible. And so, I really try to make their homeschool time a priority in our daily schedule and something that we work around. And we've tried lots of different times of the day for homeschooling. But for my kids in this season of life, what we found is that it really works best to start out with homeschool right away in the morning. So we usually do our homeschool first thing after my kids wake up. And we actually do quite a bit of it while they're eating breakfast. We sit all around the table together as a family. And while they're eating, I'm reading to them either a read aloud or just different parts of our daily curriculum that need to be read. And that's a really great time for them because they're able to learn together and they're able to really concentrate on what we're learning while they're eating their breakfast. So we love that time. And then we try to get the rest of our homeschool done first thing in the morning while they're still fresh and just really have the energy to be able to focus and concentrate on it. And then I also try to plan work blocks for myself that are uninterrupted, where I can really focus on getting my work done. And during this season, those are usually happening either first thing in the morning before my kids wake up, or sometimes I'll work in the middle of the day during their nap time.
Oh, you still have naps. Oh, I remember those wonderful days.
Yeah, well, my youngest still naps, and then my oldest has an independent quiet time during that time.
Okay, yeah. I was always very sad. Well, I was very sad when we lost the nap time. I remember that. But
Yep.
I think what's really great is the flexibility of homeschool to be able to find that time when your kids are really fresh and able to concentrate. Because I think I've spoken to other homeschoolers who have teenagers and they tend to want to homeschool a bit later. So it's kind of great to be able to find that sweet spot where they are at their best to learn.
That's so true. And that's one of the things that I always tell families that are just getting started with homeschooling is how important it is to really spend time observing your child and getting to know your child as a learner and to really start to recognize when that time of day is for your child. So when we first started, we tried all sorts of different things and some of them worked really well and some of them didn't, but this was just the schedule that ended up working out best for our family and for my kids.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And how do you stay organized in terms of homeschooling and working? Kind of how do you stay organized to fit everything into the day?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I feel like as a working homeschool parent, there are just so many different things that need to get done every day and so many things that are really pulling my attention. So I think one of the things that is really helpful is that I have a pretty extensive to-do list. And I try to make sure that I write down everything that I'm thinking about because I have a pretty big mental load between just things that need to be done for the household or like tasks for work or things that we need to do for our homeschool. And so I try to make sure that I have one central spot where everything gets written down. And then from there, I spend time in the evening each night thinking about what needs to get done the next day and trying to set some priorities for myself in each area in terms of what we'll be doing in our homeschool the next day and what are the most essential things that need to get done for our household and for my business and for my family. And then those priorities go into the schedule in specific times and then I'm able to work the rest of the things that come that day around those priorities that I've identified.
And you said you kind of also block your time. I think that's also a really good way to stay organized, I find.
I do. I found that the more focused I am when I'm planning my day and the more specific I can be with those time blocks, actually, the more flexible I become because I don't mind when the interruptions that happen in the day get in the way of the things that I have planned because I know that I have a time scheduled later where I'll be able to come back to that thing.
Absolutely. And do you think it's quite tricky to stay organized with smaller kids? Because I know for me, I know it kind of got easier. My kids are 10 now when they as they've grown older. But do you find it quite challenging as they are still quite small?
I think so. Yeah, it's hard because I need to create a really detailed schedule, but then I also need to hold that schedule very loosely because the reality is that my day is going to look a lot like whatever my kids need at the moment. And so I know that there are certain things that I want to get done as best as I can, but the important priority is going to be being there for them and for their needs in the moment. And so I have to sort of hold both of those things when I'm planning my day.
Sure, yes, I can imagine. Yeah. And what is your absolute favorite homeschooling resource and why?
Yeah, so this has actually become really clear to me in the last month. So, my favorite homeschooling resource is our library. I love our library, and we go there often, several times a month at least, to pick out a large stack of new books. And then a lot of our homeschool time is really just us spending time reading together, or my kids spending time reading. And our library is closed right now because they're doing some renovations, and it has been such a challenge to be without it. But it's just helping me appreciate how grateful I really am for that resource and for being able to get that constant supply of new books at our house.
Yes, a lot of people I've interviewed have said that their library is their favorite resource, and I would definitely say it's mine as well. I love it.
Yeah.
And have there been times when you've wanted to quit homeschooling or being a working homeschool mom? And if so, how did you get through these times?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that every homeschool mom goes through this in different seasons. And I think it's really important, first of all, just to recognize that it's okay to think that sometimes. I don't know that there are things that we do as people where we're going to love it 100% of the time. And that doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a bad homeschooler. It just means that you're going through a season. So I think that that's really important to recognize. But I know one time in particular for me was like about a year ago this time. I was going through some really difficult health challenges. And because of that, I was very tired all of the time. And I just needed to spend a lot of time sleeping and resting. And it was a really difficult season of life in general. And it was difficult to homeschool at that time because I felt like no matter what I was doing, it was never enough. And I felt like I didn't have the energy to really be able to give to my kids in the way that I wanted to. And so it was really important to just really get a lot of support. I reached out to lots of other family and friends that were supportive of us homeschooling and other friends that were homeschooling as well, just for encouragement and support through that time. And then it was also really important to delegate. I did a lot of delegating to my husband and again to family and friends, and people were able to come alongside and just help me to be able to get all of those things done that I needed to do.
I think a community is invaluable as a homeschooler. I think absolutely.
So true.
Mm. And what about if you have a really tough homeschool day? What do you do to get through a tough day?
Yeah, definitely. I think we all have these as well, just days where kids are not feeling well or where things are crazy or just, yeah. I think one of the things that we like to do if it's really a tough day is just to stop what we're doing with our lesson plan and just to put everything away. I think it's okay sometimes to not get everything done. And I think it's important as a homeschool parent to really accept that there are going to be days where everything gets done and there are going to be days where it doesn't. And that's all teachers, right? That's not just
Mm.
us as homeschoolers in the public schools. There are days too where the teacher doesn't get through everything on the lesson plan, and that's okay. So I think that's what we do first of all is we stop. And then a lot of times if it's just a really tough day, I'll just get my kids and a big stack of books and a blanket, and we'll just snuggle on the couch and read for a while. And my kids always really enjoy being read to, and I really enjoy reading out loud to them. And so that's just a fun way to just be able to spend some time together and still be learning something and not to have to worry about the specifics of actually getting everything that's on the plan done.
Sure, yes. I think also I've noticed that as I've become more experienced, though, that I've become less obsessed with getting everything done during the day. Well, not obsessed, but less worried about it. Because I think when you start out, you feel like you have to prove yourself. I don't know if you felt that when you started out with homeschooling, that you have to get everything done, that you have to double down or push through um, when days are tough. I don't know what your experiences were at the beginning of homeschooling.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely had that experience as well. Before I had my kids, I was a public school teacher, and so I spent a little over a decade teaching in both public and private schools. And I definitely, when I came home and started to homeschool my kids, I felt a lot of pressure from that because I had seen both sides, and this was so important to be able to do it right for my kids. And so I wanted everything to go perfectly. I wanted every lesson to be perfect. I wanted every day to be perfect. I wanted them to learn everything they possibly could. And over time, I definitely have started to realize that we're going to have good days and bad days, but that overall, my kids are learning a lot. And I think I've also started to realize that they're learning a lot just from being around me and my husband and just seeing how we're living. And like right now we're remodeling our home, and so we have a lot of appointments being made and a lot of phone calls being made and a lot of communication happening, and they're just being able to watch how we're working through that whole process. And then they're also learning a lot about home repairs and how homes are built. So it's been a really interesting learning experience for them, and nothing that we're doing intentionally is a part of our homeschool curriculum, but I know that they're learning so many important life skills just as they're watching us walk through this process.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and the learning is just continuous and all the time. I think that's also another beautiful thing about homeschooling is you have the opportunity to offer your kids that.
So true.
And
Yeah.
how important do you think mindset is for being a successful working homeschool mom?
Oh, I love that you asked that because I do think that mindset is really important. And I think it's important for being a successful working homeschool mom, but I really think it's important for being successful at anything that you do.
Mm,
Because the more that I work through this, the more that I'm learning that no matter what I'm thinking, my brain is going to try to prove that thought right. So lately, I've been working through the thought of I don't have enough time because I feel like I
mm,
think that thought often. I'm always thinking I don't have enough time. And so my brain is trying to find those times where it's proving itself right. It's looking for times where I didn't have time to finish something, or times when I was really busy, or times when I was really stressed. And it's making me focus on those times instead of focusing on how I can use my time in the best way possible. And so instead, I'm trying to really think about choosing to focus on what is most important. And when I think about that instead, that's helping me really be inspired and motivated to use the most of all of my time as best as I can.
sure. And I think it also just goes to show how much we grow as well when we grow and learn when we homeschool our kids as well. It's not just the kids that are learning, but we are learning so much as well about ourselves, about our kids, about everything.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like I'm learning a lot about the subjects that I'm teaching my kids. I feel like I'm learning those subjects more deeply than I ever did in school. But I also feel like I'm learning a lot about my kids, which is really valuable. I feel like I'm getting to know them in a whole new way as their teacher. And I feel like over time, as that relationship between teacher and student is developing for us, that I'm getting to know them on a whole new level that I wouldn't have if we weren't homeschooling. And I feel like that's such a blessing because I get to be the one to be there to see when they finally get something or when that little light goes off and they understand for the first time. And that's just such a blessing. And I feel like I'm learning a lot about how they're motivated and how they like to learn. And just all of those things are just giving us such a deeper, closer relationship through all that time that we're spending together with homeschooling.
Absolutely, yeah. And you miss out on so much when your kids are at school. I know I definitely felt that, and I was so glad to have them home from school. And so, what
So
does
true.
self? Sorry, sorry, sorry.
Go ahead.
So, what does self care look like for you?
Yeah, I think this is so important for homeschool parents. I know that when my kids were first born, I really struggled with taking time for myself and feeling like I could take time for self care. And so for a while, when my kids were really small, I just never did. And it led to this point where I was just really burned out and really struggling with mental health really because I was never taking any time for myself. And so I ended up sort of developing this system with my husband where once a week I have a scheduled time where it's going to be my time to just intentionally reflect on how my week has gone and to spend some time doing self care. And it happens every week. We have it planned for a certain evening. And at first, I felt really guilty about that. But my husband and my kids have both come to really enjoy and look forward to that time because it's the special time that they have together because he's off at work during the day. And so they don't see as much of each other. And so it's been a positive thing for them to be able to have some one-on-one time with him. But then during
Mm.
that time, I'm doing a check-in for myself. So I have a list of all of the different areas in my life that are important to me. So things like physical health, my family, my homeschool, the service and volunteering that I do, mental health, learning things, just all the different areas of my life that are really important to be able to do well. And then I just spend some time reflecting on each area. How am I doing? And looking for any areas that are neglected. And then if there are any of those, then I'm making plans for how I can include more of that and be able to move towards a more balanced life. And then also just spending some time intentionally in self care.
Sure. And I love the fact that you schedule it in because I think a lot of women don't do that. And I mean, you're never going to get to do self care if you don't actually put it into your schedule, I think.
Exactly. And I felt
Mm.
so guilty when I first did it.
Mm.
I felt so guilty needing that. But I realized that I needed, I didn't need much time. I mean, it takes maybe an hour a week to go through all of this and do all of these things. But that time, just knowing that it's coming and knowing that it's scheduled is so encouraging to me
Mm.
because I can go through the rest of my week knowing that no matter what happens, that self care time is coming.
Yes, absolutely. And what do you think are the most important things to do when starting out with homeschooling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I think one of the things that parents really need to spend some time doing is observing their child. And this can be really counterintuitive because a lot of times when we first start homeschooling, we think, okay, I need to pick a curriculum and I need to make a plan and I need to figure out what I need to do. And, or if you just pull your child out from public school, maybe in the middle of the year, then you're thinking, okay, we need to get started right away so we don't get behind. But I actually think it's really important at the beginning to just spend a lot of time with your child and learning together with your child and just observing your child and getting to know them as a learner. I think it takes time, even though you've been your child's parent their whole life, I think it takes time to get to know them as their teacher. And that relationship of being your child's teacher is different than your relationship of being your child's mom. And so it takes some time to really adjust to that role and that relationship and to get to know your child as a learner. So, learning what kind of learning style, learning how they're motivated, learning what kinds of things they like. And if we can take some time at the beginning to really observe them and to get to know sort of those things about them, then I think it can really help us to make better plans and to make better curriculum choices. So, we're choosing things that work together with how our child's brain learns, and I think that that can help us be more effective as homeschool parents too. And then I think it's also important that we take time to give ourselves grace as well. I think that homeschooling is a really big transition for families, whether or not your child has been in a public school setting beforehand. Either way, it's a really big transition. And so it's important to just give ourselves some grace and understand that it's going to take some time to really get good at it. I read this study not too long ago, and it was talking about public schools and about how when public school kids stay with the same teacher for more than 1 year, that they get learning growth and advantages by being with that same teacher. And I thought that study was really interesting because that's what we do as homeschool parents. We're with our kids for more than 1 year. But it was also really interesting because in the study, they said that the kids didn't see those advantages until the second year. And so, as a parent, that was really interesting for me because it was a good reminder that that first year, we're taking the time to get to know our kids just like those public school teachers in the study were. And then in the second year and beyond, that's when our kids really start to see those advantages of us really knowing them well as their parent and as their teacher, because we've been with them for so long and we've spent so much time teaching them.
Wow, that's a really, really interesting study. And obviously, in public school, you are shifting from one teacher to another. Well, that's what happens in South Africa. You definitely change your teacher every year. Is it the same in the US?
Yeah, in most of the classrooms it
Mm.
is. It's rare to have one where you don't change the teacher from year to year, but there are
Mhm.
some that do it, and that's what they were studying in this study.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. Yes, of course, because then you build a relationship, you get to know them exactly. But it makes, now that you say it, it just makes so much sense. But I wonder why they don't keep the teacher. I suppose it's logistics, I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I think it's because they think that the teacher becomes an expert at teaching second grade or teaching
uh-huh.
ninth grade English or whatever. And so they want that teacher to be able to teach the subject that they're an expert in. But I think that it's more important to be an expert in your child than to be an expert in the subject area. And that's what I tell my parents that are going through my Reading Better Together curriculum. I tell them that it's so much more important to be an expert in your child and that you want to get to know your child really well, and that really that's your superpower as a homeschool parent, is that you know your child better than anyone else does. And because you know how they're motivated and how they like to learn and how they think and what kinds of things are really helpful to them, you will be able to teach them all the subjects better than somebody who doesn't know them, just because you know them. And I think that as homeschool parents, we can learn how to teach ninth grade English or second grade or whatever it is. We'll learn those things, but that knowledge of your child is what really sets you apart and really makes you a great teacher.
Wow, yes. Oh, I love that. That's so, yeah, it makes so much sense. I can't believe I never thought of that.
Hmm.
Yes, it's fantastic. And then if you could think of one piece of advice for being a happy and thriving working homeschool mom, what would that be?
Yeah, definitely. I think it goes back to what we were talking about with self care. I think it's so important to make sure that even though you've got all of these different things pulling your attention, that you are taking time for yourself as well. Because I think that we can't give to all of these different things unless we're feeling filled up as well. So, the kinds of things that refresh and energize us, we need to make those a priority as well.
Absolutely, so true. And then finally, is there anything you're working on at the moment or anything you'd like to share? And where can people find you online?
Definitely. So I have lots of resources for parents who are just getting started with homeschooling, but also especially for parents who are teaching their kids how to read. I think that this is something that's so important for us as homeschool parents. And often it's such a struggle because we start out with kids who love to be read to and are so excited. And then somehow in the process of teaching them how to read, they start to hate reading and we turn it into this giant struggle. And so my goal is to be able to help homeschool parents make their kids fall in love with books and with reading through the process of teaching them how to read. And so I have lots of resources for how to do that over at the blog at homeschoolingforhim.com or on any of the socials at homeschooling for him.
Okay, awesome. Yes, I think it's so important to raise readers, though, isn't it? Yes. Okay, great. And I'll obviously link those in the show notes. Okay, so thanks so much. It was really, really lovely to chat, and it was very interesting to hear your experiences and your advice. And thanks so much for your time as well.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All righty. Okay, just going to stop. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. Drop me a DM on Instagram or post on the Working Homeschool Mom support group over on Facebook. And let me know what resonated the most with you. It would also be great if you could rate, review, and subscribe, or share the podcast with a working homeschool mom who might need it. It's my mission to support as many working homeschool moms as possible. Until next time, take care. Hello and welcome to the Strike a Balance podcast for working homeschool moms. This is Charlotte Jones. I'm a homeschool coach and homeschooling mom of twin boys.